ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the MSP Initiative Thursday edition. We are just getting everything queued up, so stand by while we get things going. And while that's happening, Dave, what's up, man? How you doing?
I am Rockstar, man. It's another day in paradise because I'm in my house like everybody else. I always quip that paradise is where you make it, and I've chosen right now that my particular paradise is my house.
No, totally get it. Totally get it. I mean, where are you based out of actually geographically?
So I'm just outside Washington, D.C. So I'm in the Northern Virginia area. So we're still under state lockdown. Like sections of Virginia have opened up, but the Northern Virginia area is still under lockdown. So I'm part of that whole national capital region.
Yeah, no, totally get it. I'm not too far away. I'm in Philly Metro, so pretty easy driving distance, I think, especially with no traffic on the road.
Oh yeah, it's a nice easy 2-hour drive now.
Exactly. I wish it was always that way.
I know.
Well, at least the weather's getting better, right? I mean,
I'm expecting the weekend may have some sun, be able to be in my backyard or even get out for a drive. So
are you a runner, jogger, walker guy, or?
So walker bike ride and do bike rides has been and I live right by a trail, so like I can do like a nice 14-mile bike down to the lake, which is all part of the Fairfax County Park systems, and it's pretty awesome. It's a nice way of getting out, and that's my daily exercise, either out there walking or biking, or I also do some PlayStation VR for the rainy days.
I was gonna say, any social distancing parking lot parties recently?
I am doing something for my wife's birthday in June, where I have like figured out all the social distancing rules to make it all good and as relatively safe as you can do this kind of stuff. So
nah, totally understand. So now that we kind of got the wheels on the road and all of our various streams are underway, why don't we just start off with welcome to the show, Dave Sobel. For anyone that doesn't know you, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself and how your journey through the channel has taken you up to this point and what you're currently up to?
Sure. So I'm Dave Sobel. I'm a technologist by background. So I actually I have a degree in computer science. I swear I'm an actual engineer type person. So I started my career that way. I was a programmer, was a QA tester, did a bunch of stuff. And in 2002, during a downtime, my programming web architect role was eliminated along with all of my developers on Valentine's Day of 2002. And so at that point, I had the opportunity to figure out what I was doing with myself next. And I said, I'm going to try and build my own business. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take on infrastructure, because I had always done programming plus infrastructure as my specialty. And I said, I'm going to take out an infrastructure business. And I said, I'm going to try this for a little while. Worst case, I go back and get a job. Well, we landed our first, what we would now call a managed services deal, which was a $12,000 a month management of a 5-location cancer care facility. Was my first managed services deal. So go big or go home. I went big. So that was my first deal, and I ran that business for a decade, growing it in the DC metro area and servicing customers all around. So I come from the solution provider background, and during that time was the guy that would volunteer for everything. So volunteered at CompTIA and was on the managed services community and helped found the mobility community. And I was an HTG peer groups guy, and then volunteered, and I was the guy who broke HTG into Europe. So volunteered to say, like, when we were growing HTG, I said, let's do it in Europe. And I grew HTG in Europe and founded the first UK group. Decided I wanted to write a book. I was the guy so I wrote a book. I wrote a book on virtualization, then became a Microsoft MVP, and was the guy that would always submit a paper or an idea to present at a conference. So I spoke at Worldwide Partner Conference, and we were nominated for a Partner of the Year, all of that kind of stuff. And then I had the opportunity to sell that business at the end of 2012, or going into 2012. And I said, you know what I want to do is I want to keep learning. I really love what we do as a technology space, helping customers, but I want to understand the ecosystem better. And rather than like go be a consultant, I'm going to go be a vendor. And so I went off and I was the head of community for Level Platforms. So if anybody been doing this a little while, remembers Level Platforms, that technology is now Barracuda's RMM technology. But I worked for Dan Wensley of now Warranty Master, and I was colleagues with Rob Ray, who Rob ran the sales group. I ran the community group.
It's a small world starts to play in the background.
It totally is, and it was great fun. And we built, those guys had built something really amazing, and then we took it across the finish line and sold that business to AVG at the time. And it was time for the next adventure. And so I hopped over to GFI, which was their GFI Max group. And with the same mission as I'm going to build up the community efforts there, launched their, took their conference series to the next level, took their education to the next level. We became Logic Now, and then we sold that business to SolarWinds. And for me, it was just all about learning. It's like, I want to keep trying this. And I'd never been at a company through the IPO process. I'd never done that. I'd always worked for smaller companies. So I wanted to learn. I said, I want to do that. So I went through the IPO, and I stayed a year post IPO to learn again, how that all worked. And it had reached its natural conclusion. It's like, okay, I learned what I wanted to do. And I said, what's my next adventure? And for me, the next adventure was to try and tackle some of the issues that service providers are underserved on from the media organizations. Like, I think we need to talk about ethics and big tech and what that means for service providers, or the coming regulation. Like, there's regulation in our space, and not just about like, how do we implement GDPR, but no, like they're looking at how to regulate tech services companies. Like, we got to have a conversation about that, or we need to have conversations about what the moves of vendors mean and how that trickles down. And I looked at the media landscape and I said, there's a lot of stuff that helps vendors with their messaging, but there isn't somebody that's like the voice of the service provider. I want to step into that space, and I could complain about it, or I could do something about it. So my current endeavor is I've launched a couple of podcasts. My flagship one is one called The Business of Tech. It is a daily 5-minute news and commentary podcast that focuses on 3 to 4 stories of the day and why you as a service provider should care. Meaning, is it going to impact my business? Is there an opportunity here? Is there something coming down the road? Is this a strategy understanding thing? Why do I care about these stories? I also do a weekly podcast with Ryan Morris and Carl Polachek called Killing It, where we take larger issues, yes, Killing It, where we take larger issues and we break them down. We do 3 topics, 3 hosts, 30 minutes is that format. So you can kind of think of like, if Business of Tech is like the sports center of the channel, like you can think of Killing It like Pardon the Interruption, right? Where it's a little bit more commentary. And then I do stuff like this, where it's the like, you the small service provider, you the mid-sized service provider, you're not the one hiring Gartner or Forrester to be your analyst, but you need an analyst still. That's what I do. Is I'm available to be the analyst for the provider that needs that kind of stuff. You need a question answered. That's what I'm here for. And I do that as a community kind of driven piece. And so I love having these conversations and answering any question that comes up.
Wow. I mean, listen, just the fact that you started in the trench, you sold your company, you went to the other side of the train tracks, you've been through that, trying to help other people through that, a whole transition from a software standpoint. I mean, it comes with a world of experience. And this is kind of why I wanted to bring you on today. Just talk shop a little bit, because, I think everybody's just trying to understand where things go from here as we continue through this whole, kind of 100-year like storm that rolled through for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Unavoidable or not. So I will, I've been kind of paying attention. And one of the ones that was really interesting that you did on your podcast recently was you interviewed the top law enforcement people from the district attorney's office or state attorney general's office, what it was?
Secretary of State for Louisiana, a man by the name of Kyle Ardoin. So he's and it's a really fascinating story, because we'd all tracked it from the perspective of the incidents and what happened and the ransomware, and there's been lots of coverage of that.
Let's zoom out on this for anyone that doesn't know. Right before COVID really started becoming something, there was a lot of like Texas was hit, 22 municipalities, Louisiana was hit. And all of a sudden there's this like epiphany, right? Because, we're all watching the news and all of the major platforms have some event at some point that pops up, it seems. And one of the, kind of state of Louisiana said, hey, listen, if you're misrepresenting yourself as a service provider, as an MSP, as a technology company, then we got a problem, and you're either going to fix it on your own or we're going to fix it for you. And this is where things got a little bit uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, it's a totally interesting story. So like, and the backstory of that is we know all of those incidents, right? So let's focus on Louisiana for a second. A number of their municipalities totally hit. City of New Orleans declares a state of emergency to handle the shutdown of all of the city services. It was really bad, right? And what happened was, of course, Secretary of State, one of the men involved in coordination of this, was the person helping to coordinate with the FBI on the responses. So became intimately familiar with the technical issue, but then he digs into it and he discovers, that many of these small municipalities, they are like small businesses. They're being served by these organizations called MSPs. And he digs into this and goes, well, what are they buying? What are the services that they're selling? What are they buying? And he learns our space. He understands what an MSP offers. He understands the kinds of what basic security is versus an advanced offering. He understands the difference between an MSP and an MSSP. Like, this is a guy who digs into it because he's managing the coordination, if I retranslate it, of a lot of little small companies, they're little small organizations being served by their MSP, providers, and he learns this whole space. And one of the things he discovers is like, look, these are people who are being underserved. Like, and there's no rhyme or reason to this. He goes, like, anybody can be an MSP. Anybody can sign up, right? Anybody can declare this. There's no vetting to this. There's no certifications. There's no single way of knowing what the services are. Their quality is all over the map. And he really starts understanding, like, I've got a problem here. He then goes forth and so he understands the problem and as part of his after actions says, I got to start figuring this all out. He goes to a meeting of fellow Secretary of States and says, we have to understand this space called managed services. we have got to dive into this. And he warns fellow secretaries of state. So all 50 states get warned, you've got to understand this space better. And he's working with his colleagues in legislation to introduce a law in the state of Louisiana asking for the registration. He's going to define what an MSP is and what an MSSP is, and asking those companies to register with his office. Now, here's like the little cherry on top of all of this. Erdogan is a pro-business Republican.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. So his statement on my show when I interviewed him was, and it's a fascinating interview. I would tell him, if you didn't catch it, go listen. What he said is like, look, I'm a free market guy, but if the market doesn't regulate itself, we have to step in because this is an actual risk to city operations, to government, to stability of our society. He goes, so if the market doesn't fix it itself, we have to step in.
Well, one of the interesting things I really, really, really I highlighted it when I listened to this. And to Dave's point, Dave, where do they go listen to this, by the way?
Yeah, so you can catch all my shows at mspradio.com, has all the links. You can catch it on all your favorite podcatchers, and you can even listen on the website if you're so inclined.
So go back and listen to this one, because one of the things I took away from this, and I still have it on top of my mind, was he said, hey, listen, the reason we're even talking about this is because of the MSP being afraid to go back to their customer and say, hey, you really need this, you don't have it, and I need to charge you more. It's like the dichotomy of the fact that the MSPs aren't good at sales and marketing. Now, all of a sudden, you got somebody who's potentially going to say, well, because you didn't do that, I'm now going to maybe make it a law. That's scary, man.
Right. It's seriously scary here. Like, this is seriously scary because, and we all talk about like, oh, we're not good at sales and marketing. Oh, and you hear all the time, right? Oh, I'm afraid my customer might leave me or they might not buy that. Well, now if you don't, you might be complicit in, not in failing to deliver security services properly. And again, I'm pointing to that there are lawmakers that are looking at this problem saying, we have to do something about this. Yeah, and this is all pre. And what's interesting to me is I say, like, look, right now we actually can say a few things. I think trends that happened before the current situation are now accelerating. I don't believe that this has gone away. I don't believe that at all. And I'm now pointing to the bigger trends. I've covered a bunch of stories recently on Business of Tech about European lawmakers moving to accelerate their moves on big tech. That is just showing me, look, now that they're figuring out that they have to legislate in the current situation, they're moving on their other stuff, and they've got to move on these issues. I don't expect this to go away.
Yeah, it's very ironic because over the last even 10 years, I'm just narrowing it down. It's way more than this. I mean, laws always drastically dragged behind the current technology state of play, right? I mean,
Right.
there's still industries like insurance and medical, and they're still sending stuff by fax machine, Dave.
Right. Sure.
So my point is, like, all of a sudden, to your point, the people in charge who are writing these laws, and I would argue sometimes writing more laws than we can even keep up with, are like, to your point, fast forwarding and saying we need to make changes now, like today, while it's happening. And man, I mean, like, we already don't have enough technology stuff to keep up with. The legal stuff could really clog the pipes.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And my message has very much been look, you can let this happen to you, or you can get involved. Like, and we both as an industry, but more importantly as service providers, need to be stepping up on this. We need to come together. We need to engage our trade organizations. We need to engage peer groups. We need to be pushing to get involved in this. I believe that there is a healthy space that we can occupy that's good for industry. Let me observe, it's really easy to shake your fist at regulation and government, right? Like, it's instinctually really easy. But I'm going to make an example that I think makes it easy for everybody to understand. If you let business just do anything, there are lots of examples that show that that's not actually the way society works. You know what? If I was a chemical company and I was producing chemicals and I had toxic waste, the actual best way to dispose of it, the cheapest way, is to dump it. Like, dump it in a river, dump it in a landfill, to just get rid of it, right? It's cheapest, fastest. But we as society have decided that clean water is important to us. that like, we like clean water. So we're going to say to the chemical producers, you know what? We're not going to let you just dump anything you want into a river, because that's bad. And so this is actually, at some level, if you think about it through that lens, just look, there are areas where we know this is bad, like no security, completely unmanaged security. That's bad. We can have healthy debates, smart debates as an industry, as people, as lawmakers, about where the lines are, like what we're willing to put up with. But for the same reason that we've kind of all agreed that in principle, clean water is good. In principle, some baseline security, some baseline regulation, probably worth us all coming together on understanding what that is. Let's not just be completely anti this. Let's look at it smartly. And as an industry, let's try and offer stuff. Because, by the way, I'll point again to this example. Here's a lawmaker who's saying, like, look, I want industry to join in. The reason he's one of his pieces of his law is he's asking people to register with his office. Now, this is not law that's passed. This is what he's talking about. His justification is, he goes, I don't even know what's out there. I don't even know who to talk to understand what the problem is, because I have no insight into this industry. So I'm asking people to register simply to get a landscape to start having these conversations. I'm
a comic book guy, Dave. If it's like when the X-Men and the mutants had to register, bad things happened after that. So
agreed. But the basic if you let it happen to you, if we extend the comic book analogy, right? Part of the argument is that they need to get involved, right? And they need to have a discussion about it. There were groups that simply didn't want to be involved at the table. And that's where the conflict starts. I think we need to get involved and we need to have that conversation, and we need to be pushing as an industry to do so.
No, totally agree. To your water analogy, Dave, I just watched a movie, since we're all binge watching everything these days. Dark Waters, which is a story about DuPont and Teflon.
Yeah.
And how like almost 99% of all human beings on the planet have like this compound in their bloodstream that can't be broken down.
Right.
Because of the chemicals they use to make Teflon. And I was like, oh, that's not good at all.
That doesn't seem good. Right? Like, it's, again, and so, like, look, no matter what we are on the spectrum, and business is good, right? We're in the business of growing businesses. We're in the growing business of making money. But society does have some limits, right? There are some basic limits. Things like we'd like to have roads, we'd like to have clean water, we want to have safe communities to grow. Like, there are areas we can agree on. Now, we may disagree on the way we get there, but that's a healthy debate. That's not a bad thing. That's a discussion working through the issues. What we have right now is just the Wild West, and if we don't do something about it, it will happen to us.
100%. Now I'm going to shift thoughts, because
sure,
another one of your like weekly, kind of Sports Center, thought strategies was the whole vendor side of the equation during this time, right? Where the MSP is pinch, they're between the software company and the vendor and the end user, right? They're in that sandwich.
Yep.
And you kind of put like a very strong sentiment out towards, hey, listen, not everybody's doing what they probably should be doing during this time. So, why don't you kind of share with the crowd that maybe didn't see that, what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah. So when I was coming out of this, when I think about this, I worry about solution providers, right? Like, my people, right? Like, I am one, I grew up that way, I think that way. And my goal through all of this is to try and help as many solution providers as possible survive, right? I think a healthy ecosystem of companies that help small businesses is something we desperately need. So I look at it through that lens. The piece that I'm really looking at is one of the things that actually I love about our space is there's so many people with really big hearts, right? A lot, when I talk to solution providers all the time, MSPs, technology services, whatever you call yourself, who love their customers and want to do the right thing with their customers. These are the people that work till the middle of the night. We saw it in the transition from work from home. I mean, 200% increases in ticket loads, and people were just slaving away to make the transition, right? And that's so admirable. But what I then look at that and say is, like, look, I want to make sure that they're all in a position to do well over time. The data tells me that most small businesses don't have enough cash on hand to go more than, say, 30 to 90 days, in terms of operation. Like, that's the reality of that. And when I look at what they're talking about, like, I look and say, the number one expense of a solution provider is labor. Like, leaps and bounds, labor is the bit. And that's where you see, like, if you look at PPP money, if you look at the investment of like that, you see that the investment is in making sure that we're protecting those people and those salaries. The bit that was starting to really bother me was I'm seeing education coming out in the channel talking about ways to help your customers. And statements like, well, you can waive fees and you can, help people by lowering your prices or offering discounts. These are devastating moves when cash is so tight. Like, they are just absolutely harmful. When your number one expense is labor, if you're discounting your labor and offering the same thing, you still have to pay the people. And when I dug into it, I'm finding examples when I'd ask that same vendor who's saying, well, you should go discount your services. And I asked the vendor, hey, vendor, are you offering discounts on your product? And the answer is no. It's like, wait a second, you are protecting your own revenue by making them by asking them to continue to offer their service, consume your software, yet not focus on the bits that keep someone survival. Solution providers are not banks. These are not organizations that should be taking out loans in order to keep their customers or their vendors in business. And I don't want to see that kind of pressure. Now, moves that I think are important, if you're talking about rebalancing the relationship of customers having financial problems and wants to back off on stuff, I'm totally good with that. Like, that makes perfect sense to me. If if I'm seeing where you want to engage and you want to do less of something, like, that works for me too. But in terms of, like, the impetus on putting it all on a solution provider, I'm pushing back against that. So that's sort of where this all sort of started for me. Jenny, I think we've lost George, if I'm seeing this correctly. See, he's giving me a platform to just keep talking, which is always dangerous, because now I can say anything I want, and he's not here to keep an eye on me. So where he was going with that is and I'll fill in a little bit while we wait for him to rejoin. So what I look for in the way that I'm engaging here is I'm trying to make sure that solution providers are best done. If I'm looking at their cash flow and I'm saying, okay, they are not positioned well from a cash perspective, I'm going to start from the position of cash is king. And I want to make sure that solution providers are running their business in a way that is positioned for long-term success. I do then say, like, I've been working through, and I've been doing some YouTube videos on some of the pieces around this, as well as bonus episodes of my podcast, where I'm focused on strategies that work for this. I am anti-discounting across the board. My colleague, Ryan Morris, who hosts Killing It with me, calls it a channel cancer. I think discounts are the worst possible thing you can ever do. It's money you never get back. If you reprice, meaning I'm going to offer a lesser set of things for a lower price, I'm totally cool with that, because you're going to still balance for profit, and you're still going to make sure you're positioned. You're just helping your customer with a lower burn rate. If you are helping customers take advantage of programs that are out there, I'm also good for that too. So, for example, and I've been praising them really well, George. I've been praising Ingram Micro really well. George, I took to the next question, which is where that advice had been going.
Yeah.
So one of the things I've been saying is, like, I've been really praising organizations like Ingram Micro and the distributors, because I think they're doing a really great job about making money and credit available, because that's the value they add. And by the way, I freely admit, I have been eating crow over my own statements. I've been dismissive. I've been dismissive in the past of distribution. And I have, during this time, they have really shown their value in, not only are they helping, connect people to product, but they also help connect to financing. And I think that is a really incredibly valuable resource, and was undervalued prior, when credit was easy and money was easy. But in a situation like right now, where customers are concerned about revenue, distribution has been doing a great job about offering ways to help with that.
Yeah,
so
all the distributors have definitely opened up their credit access lines and have expanded their payback terms from 30 days up to 90, 120.
Yeah, because my theme has been, like, the solution provider is not a bank. You are not a bank. You are not supposed to do not do things that put you at risk of survival. You want to help your customers. The best way to help your customers is be there on the other side. You have to help them through the entire process. And if you can't do that, you're not well positioned. So I am, like, railing on people that, like, the two categories of people that I'm willing to call out. The first is, I will call out a vendor who is, sitting on their giant piles of cash and then telling their solution provider partners, oh, we'll discount, or all, you take on the burden. No, service providers, do not take on that burden. That's not your job.
There's definitely a lot of new thoughts around this, right? Because we're starting to see some of these, bigger guys shed some headcount, right?
Right.
Seems like that's all of a sudden they're kind of cutting from both sides a little bit, right? They're cutting
Right.
the back end, but then what are they doing on the front end to help the guy in the sandwich, right?
Exactly.
So
So that's the first bit. And the other thing that I will completely call out is like I've been shaking my fist at consultants in the space that are using opinions like best practices. Like I'm gonna say there is an actual definition of what a best practice is. A best practice is an idea that has been tested by a number of people and shown through data that it is a practice of highest performing organizations. That is a best practice. A best practice is not, oh, I did this one time at my business and it worked. That is not it. I was talking to a consultant who was saying the exact same this whole same thing. It says, oh, well, if you want to help your customers, what you should do is during the downtimes, like offer them discounts because they're going to get to the other side and they're going to love you. And I was like, okay, that's your recommendation. What data is that based off of? Like what data? Well, there's no data for the current time. Okay, so where's your recommendation coming from? Because there is data that we can talk about. Yes, it may not be perfect, right? But we can talk about things that work during recessions, things that work during downtimes. We can talk about things that have happened for underperforming companies and how they like. There's all kinds of data to this. There is testing to this. So for me, it's one of the reasons is that I always am looking to data is because I don't want to just spew a bunch of opinions without actually referencing where I have derived that idea from. If I see that from a trend or I see that from a set of data, that's where you're going to know where I'm coming from.
So I'm curious, Dave, so before you said you sold your solution provider business in 2012, that means you were operating through 2008 financial crisis, right?
Yeah, so we're operated through the 2002 downturn, through the 2008 downtime, and by the way, and I say with a smile, and I'm launching yet another business. I launched my MSP radio endeavor in October, right in the middle of another one. So I totally am coming at this from the have managed through downs.
Are you seeing similarities between these? Like, is there any things that bubble up to the top that were happening in the prior downturns that might be happening right now?
Well, the answer is that you can see some similarities to it. Like in terms of the basic principles of how to ride out a downtime are very much true. Cash is king. Ensure that you're understanding your burn rate. Watch where you're spending money. If you're able to spend money and invest in things like sales and marketing and improvement, there is opportunity to be found. Like those basic principles are there. The biggest difference between the 2008 downtime and what's happening right now is the core underlying difference in the economic reason. 2008 was a problem in the banking system, meaning cash was difficult to get. Credit was difficult to get. There was a crash in the availability of credit, and cash impacted that. That's not what's happening right now. Right now, this is you have to say it is an artificial slowdown of the economy. I will go on record as saying I'm fully supportive of this because I believe in protecting people, not jobs. I believe in protecting people. And I run my businesses ideas that way. If I invest in people, if I run through people, the jobs portion works itself out. So if I protect people, not jobs, I can actually know that I can survive this kind of time. Credit's available. Cash is available. The banks are operating. In fact, it's some of the lowest interest rates we've ever seen.
Sure.
If you are financially solvent and careful, you can navigate this. It is about proper cash management. And if you need to have credit terms, if you need to get infusions of cash, understanding the calculated risk, that money's available versus 2008, 2009, when it wasn't, right? And so a lot of businesses ran out of cash and weren't able to do anything about it, weren't able to refinance, loans came all due. that isn't the situation that we're seeing right now. But the other thing about it is that, I also say the new factor, the bit that I like to focus on is that I've never had to manage a situation where public health perception was an influence on spending. And I mean, you've never had to think about the fact that, well, will people do that? Will they feel comfortable re-engaging?
Do you think that's, I mean, like, we're in May 21st. I would say largely between now and the end of the year, probably not going to have a vaccine, realistically. Okay.
Well, absolutely.
So is that the single largest problem that solution providers should, start to try and figure, around, or are there other challenges, that are as important or even higher in the importance level?
So where I start is we sort of like we can work forward or we can work backwards. At a certain degree, like I'm going to work backwards, and I'm going to be a bit of a bummer here, and I'm sorry to everybody, but I want to approach this because I'm very much focused on this idea of we have to understand the reality and then also be incredibly optimistic that we will get through it. It's called the Stockdale Paradox. It comes from good to great. Jim Collins, if all of us love to go to that stuff. The idea of reconciling the current situation with the fact that it will get better comes from Admiral James Stockdale, prisoner of war for 7 years, who survived by reconciling those two ideas. His current situation sucked, but it will get better. Now, the current situation I believe, is difficult for a period of time. The record for the creation of a vaccine, the fastest one has previously been created, was 4 years.
Wow, 4 years.
Now, let's take a quick moment and observe the differences, right? Because I'm not trying to be like saying, like, I don't expect necessarily this is going to take 4 years, but the previous record to go from we're working on it to having it ready for human and widespread use is 4 years. We know that they are throwing way more resources at this than ever before. The scientific community is working on this at a rate unprecedented, right? I'm lucky I even have a friend at NIH who I get some comfort from talking to, who tells me, like, when he makes comments like, well, I got an email back from Dr. Fauci. It's like, okay, wait a second. You're really smart, and I feel better that you're working on this problem. So we know that there's way more resources at this thrown at than ever before. We also know that they are accelerating the process intentionally. We know that there's a whole bunch of investment. So I'm not sitting here going like, oh, it's going to take 4 years. What I'm saying is anybody who's looking at this saying a vaccine is coming in 6 months, like that, those just aren't realistic, right? We need to, because we also know we don't have the production capability. Even if I waved the wand right now and you had a vaccine, there aren't enough facilities to produce it in the quantities we need. We haven't built those yet. So let's agree for a moment. It's just going to take a little while. If I am pessimistic on that data points, I can take a conservative plan and project out. Like if I just know, like, it's going to take a while. So thus, in a business perspective, I am looking to make sure, how do I operate in a situation where there is that level of uncertainty? There will always be, if we look at like consumer confidence as a metric, right? Consumers are just going to be uneasy about a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? We just need to know that. We need to not fight it. We need to not rebel against it. You're not trying to convince people. You just need to accept that that's the way that it is. It's okay, right? Because for some, like, every individual human is going to deal with this at their own pace and their own way. And I think we can agree that there's going to be a number of people that it's not going to be a comfortable situation. We don't know their personal situations. We don't know what is required. And just accept that that's okay.
So you're saying, Dave, I'm not going to see you at a trade show anytime soon. Is that what you're telling me?
Probably not. Okay. I don't expect, because I just don't expect them to come back. I think there's too many people that would be uncomfortable with it. Even if you and I both said we're ready to do it, I think there's just too many people that won't be comfortable with that. And that's okay. Now, what that means then is we just need to figure out ways of moving that and moving in that environment. And thus I think there's plenty of opportunity and pivot and do things in interesting ways and find new solutions. I was talking with a solution provider just an hour ago who said, I'm servicing interior designers, right? Right.
Okay.
And you would go, well, there's a design, there's an area where it might be difficult. But you know what? Actually, interior designers may be a great opportunity. You know why? Because people are stuck at home. They're going to invest more in their own space. They're going to be looking to invest in, if I'm stuck in my house for a period of time, I'm going to make sure it's pretty nice, right? I'm going to spend the money that I might have spent elsewhere. I'm going to spend on making sure that I have the nicer TV, the nice sound system. I'm going to repaint that wall that's been bothering me for a while. And I said, if you use technology and start figuring this out, I bet there's opportunity there. Let's leverage the existing bit, find out based on that reality how we can do it, but also know we got to get through it, right? We need to make sure that we're thinking about this smartly, and you need to think that your buyer is impacted. So you asked like my first bit. I will say that my recommendation right now is I want partners, solution providers to think about the next level of their industry. Okay. And I would say, like, we're really good at this and because we're all channel people, right? So we all understand the idea of the sell-through market, right? The reason solution providers are really important in the technology ecosystem is a company like yours, you sell through solution providers. That means you service them, they service customers. We understand this multi-tiered idea. Now, solution providers, what I want you to do is I want you to think about your customers and think about who they are the multi-tier to. So for example, say you traditionally service lawyers, right? We always talk about like, serve the legal profession, right? Great industry. And at a high level, sure it is. But right now, legal has all different kinds of things. Trial lawyers probably slowed down a whole lot right now. Guys serving entertainment law, ooh, that's a weird one right now. like inconsistent. Guys that are doing insurance law, probably reasonably steady, right? At some level. Like, I want everybody from a solution provider side to go one more level deep with their customers, understand that better, because I think then you can start talking about what your actual risk is. Because I will also observe, I am not convinced that all of this statement of like, we had a great quarter, like IT is kind of insulated. I'm looking around going, 30 million plus Americans out of work. You can't tell me that that things aren't going to slow down. I just don't buy it. And by the way, the analysts tell me that too. Jay McBain did a conference presentation yesterday talking about like he's got a 60% probability of full-on recession. 25% of solution providers may be going out of business. Okay, that lines up with CDC projections. That lines up with, the words coming out of the Fed in terms of economic slowdown. We're like, you can't tell me that things are just going to be fine and all the same. So all the data tells me it isn't.
So I hadn't heard that from Jay. That's very interesting. I'm almost gloomy. This kind of feeds back into the thing that you kind of most recently went into, to this whole positivity thing. I mean, you can push to try and be positive, but that's not, you got to balance that with the reality, right?
Well, it's a marathon. We're running a marathon, and that, again, it's okay. I'm not gloom and doom. I'm not showing all the bad numbers because I'm like, oh, the sky is falling. What I'm saying is you want to focus on that. This is okay. You're going to run a marathon. This is going to take a lot longer than you want it to. But if you internalize that reality, you can then work from that. I am optimistic that we're going to all get through this. On the other side of this, that from a personal level, I'm totally looking forward to going to a baseball game and cheering out, going back to a concert. Like, I know I'll do those things again, but I'm also not going to put arbitrary deadlines around it in terms of when it's going to happen. I don't know. And I'm okay with that. I just know I will do it. I know that it's probably going to be rough for a while. That's okay. I'm just going to run the marathon, and I'm going to keep myself in fighting shape, right? I'm going to manage my cash. I'm going to do right by customers. I'm going to solve their problems. I'm going to communicate closely with them. I'm going to engage, and we're going to make sure that we're running at the rate that they need, and that everybody along the chain is doing their part. And if we run our businesses that way, knowing that we're buckling down, right? When Jay talks about a number like, he's concerned about 25% of IT businesses going out of business, I take some comfort in the fact that if I talk this way, and the top 25% get mad at me because like, oh, you're gloom and doom, Dave. But I was able to make a difference, and 1% difference at the bottom survives. That's a win. That's a huge win. But because what I also probably did is the guys in the middle are running a better marathon, because they're saying, you know what, I'm going to focus on these long-term, it's survival strategies. I'm not saying hide in your hole. I'm not saying, like, for example, I'm telling people spend on marketing. You should be communicating in marketing. You should be out there and doing it. This is a great time to be creative, try new things. But I will also then go like, don't go crazy, right? Make sure that you're spending what you can, managing your cash flow, be super sensitive on the message. If I get another email slapping COVID-19 on somebody's webinar, I'm going to scream. Like, don't rebundle the same garbage just with COVID-19. But if you're delivering real value, people totally notice that stuff.
So, okay, I agree with pretty much mostly what you said. I mean, my bigger concern now is, if the message is 25% of the guys are going to end up just closing it up, they can't make it work, right? Just like the bar down the street that couldn't open up and serve alcohol. I mean, does the financial programs that got put out, Dave, the PPP, the EIDL, the whole CARES Act, is that just prolonging things, or is that actually helping them, from your opinion?
Well, so let's take a quick moment and understand what that's intended to be for. It was a stop the bleeding move, and was here's your moment to refocus, right? And we're recording this. It's right before Memorial Day. It's the 21st. The funding's got another sort of month or so left in all of this. This is right at the time where people should be understanding, like, you should be evaluating your cash positions, understanding the things you need to do to move forward in whatever the current is. It isn't about making a bad business survive. That's not what the money was about. The money was about just giving everybody the chance to figure it out. Well, you got another couple of weeks of figuring it out. That on the other, like, that's okay. That's a good thing. Use that time, think about it. Like, might have to cut, right? You may have to do that. The goal is surviving. You can help your customers better by being there the whole time. The way you do that is keep your own shop running smart. And so for me, though, I look at those investments not from the perspective of, like, it's not about saving a failing business. What it is about making sure that you have the time to pivot, cut your expenses that aren't necessary, be lean and mean, focus on the stuff that's important. Like, be aggressive right now. Like, put your business in fighting shape. Like, that's what this time is supposed to be about. If you got a little complacent because things were easier, now's the time to tighten up. That support money is about doing that.
Okay, so with the rest of our time, I want to try and figure out, we've talked about what to do and how to help people, and like kind of the main general ideas of how to operate between now and whenever. What's your prognostication, Dave? Right, supply chains are a little bit choppy, especially IT stuff. Right, it's coming out of China. Yeah. But like, what does the next 12 months look like to you?
So I put that realistic lens on, because what I always say, my statement starts from the position of is I would love to be wrong, and I would love for things to be better than I project them to be. But if I project them out to be conservative and I'm careful and I'm wrong, everybody celebrates. But if I was to be overly optimistic and I'm wrong, and somebody fails because of that, that's a worse position to be. I'd love to be a year down the road and people go, wow, Dave thought things were a bummer, like going to be a huge bummer, and he was wrong. Man, I will toast that. Like that is a great way to be wrong. I don't have to be right all the time. What I have to do is give good advice. So what I look and say is like, look, I'm expecting, and I'll point to, I'm expecting a down revenue year dramatically. I'm expecting 2020 to be a little rough. And I'll point to, if you haven't leveraged this amazing resource, Service Leadership has put out their Rapid Recovery Planning Guide, which is a 57-page document that they have just published and made available. There's a 20-minute video that gives you the overview by Paul Dipple himself, walking through all of their information. They've got a free guide for solution providers to help understand cash flow, management of their business, what they should be projecting out. Fantastic resource. Go grab it. In that document, he talks about a down year, pretty significant down year, based on, he's using previous recession data and projecting that against the performance of what 2019 looked like, and then going from there. 2020 is going to be rough, right? It's going to be a down revenue year, and just plan for that. If you outperform, awesome. I'm so proud of you. But assume it won't. Budget down. I'm assuming this year is going to be kind of rough. I think it's going to be, people are not going to necessarily want to spend money on projects. I think they're going to be super careful on cash expenditures. Like that. Was I going to upgrade those set of machines? I'm probably going to hold off on that. Was I going to? Is it not something that I'm directly doing to drive additional revenue? No, I'm probably not going to do that. So those bits are going to dry up. That's going to be, you're not going to get that back. And I'm not expecting it'll just get delayed. No. That's just all gone. Let's just assume it's not going to be there and work based on that, because Paul's projection doesn't put us back on 2019 revenue numbers till like 2023, 2024. So it takes a little while. Now, it's not all bad, right? Next 2021, much better than 2020, but it's not as great as 2019. Like, it's going to take a little while. So I look and say, I think this year is going to be kind of rough. And I'd love to be wrong. But if I plan that it's kind of rough, my survival possibilities are way higher. I think this year is going to be kind of rough. I'm not expecting, like, for example, trade shows and all that stuff. Not going to happen this year. Just not going to happen. And I'm taking my cues from guys who are cash rich that are already saying that. Facebook, Microsoft, Google, IBM have all taken virtual events off the table. Like, they've just said, we're not even thinking about it till 2021. Okay, I can work with that plan, right? I can understand that kind of stuff. So I think other portions of the world are going to be impacted. So I look at those saying, like, that's kind of a pessimistic thing. Again, if I outperform, that's good, because I'm lean and mean and I can be in a position to do it. I think that's the situation. Some people are going to outperform that a lot. I am definitely seeing that strong solution providers right now are doing really well, because they're in a position to manage really well. They're saying they're acquiring customers. Yeah, because people have understood how important IT is, and they're reevaluating that spend as a critical spend. But I also will say, like, I'm not expecting the big projects. So I'm thinking it's going to be, I'm just saying, like, I think it's going to be rough. I'd rather plan for it being rough and be wrong.
Fair enough. So, best 1, 2, 3 things that people could do from a business planning standpoint. Should they be negotiating with vendors now? Should they be considering maybe letting some people go if they're worried about revenue loss? Should they be trying to run lean and kind of empty out inventory? All of the above. I'm just curious.
So another principle that I like to think about from a business perspective is I like to say, you make business decisions ruthlessly, but you execute them humanely. Okay. And if you work by that principle, it will serve you really, really well with that lens. So I would say, like, you need to look aggressively at your cash flow. Number one thing for people is that expense. I would rather You work with, if you think you need to let people go, I would say be aggressive. Do it early. Why? You can be generous about the way that you part with them. You can be generous. You can help them. You can offer a longer severance package. You can offer longer support. You can be more generous, in terms of healthcare or whatever that is. Look at some of the examples that are being set by some of the big tech companies. For example, Airbnb, let go a lot of different people. They were incredibly generous when the way they did it. It was a very thoughtful way of executing that decision that they had to let people go, because they were very generous with the severance packages and they were very generous with the way they engaged on healthcare. They were able to do that because they moved fast. They were aggressive. They said, this is going to be a bad year for us. We can move. So I would tell you, my first bit is look at everything about your business ruthlessly. You are in survival mode, because then you can execute humanely. So that's the first bit that I would give you that too, is look at all that stuff, re-examine every bit of expense, every little bit. If you should be looking at renegotiating on anything you possibly can. Re-examine rent, re-examine expense, and I'll call your virtual rent. So if you're in the business of, if you're looking at your virtual rent being like your software tools and your cloud pieces, if you're in a position to renegotiate that stuff, absolutely, positively do it now, because you're in a better financial position and you can leverage against it versus later when you're desperate. Absolutely be leveraging that stuff, because you're in a position now to do something about it, not later when you're desperate. So my second thing is that. The third is I would tell people to be looking at their customer base and the way that they can best serve them right now. Because if you've done the first two things, you've looked at all your business, you've been ruthless about it, about the way you're going to execute, you're lean and mean, you're ready to go, you've got great credit terms, you're also now in a position to offer the right thing to the right customers at the right time. Make sure that you don't have any fat in your offering. Make sure that you're tailored exactly with what they need, because then you are truly business critical. Make sure that you are protecting your existing customer relationships with close communication to know their situation. That's why I said, go a second level deep, understand who their customers are, so that jointly you can start talking about the impact any impact that's coming. I think it's coming. I look, again, I'd love to be wrong, right? Say I predict that there's a second way, there's this impact coming through the supply, the chain. If I'm wrong, man, make fun of me in 6 months, because then my answer will be is yeah, you made it, didn't you? You planned, you were. It's not a bad place to be. So that's my third bit, and then the final bit is the fourth is where possible, do not turn off your value of communication out from a sales and marketing perspective. Make sure it's toned correctly. Don't slap COVID-19 on every single thing you do, but yeah, we're both shaking our heads because we see so much of it. But people want genuine messages. People want to be communicated. We crave human contact. We crave communication and the ability to work together. Solve that problem. These are all things that solution providers are so good at, right? Is solving problems. Listen to their pain, talk to them, solve their pain. That's the way you go out in sales and market.
Dave, I mean, I'm loving the feedback here, because at the end of the day, I think everybody's just trying to nobody knows, right? I mean,
yeah, oh sure.
Ball. And I think I think a lot of politics get into the middle of this, unfortunately, and then everybody's trying to weave their way through this, and it's good that the communities really come together, though. That's the one thing out of this I really appreciate, right? That people are coming together and they're sharing ideas, what's working, what's not, and you're not on an island by yourself, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah, and the community is coming together. The one thing, I do shake my fist like the old man at the cloud at anybody who's what I call that optimism porn, right? I don't want people just saying oh, there's so much opportunity, everything is great. Come on, people. Let's be realistic about the situation. I am completely 100% with you that we are, people working together. That's where everybody wins. And if we collaborate, if we work together, if we push through what is a difficult situation and work on it and solve problems, we will totally be successful on the other side. Don't know that the reason I push back against that kind of blind optimism is, again, I'm going back to the Stockdale Paradox. When you asked Admiral Stockdale, who are the people that didn't survive? He goes, it was the blind optimists. The ones who kept saying, well, things will get better at Christmas. Things will get better at Easter. They'd set arbitrary deadlines. They'd get all their excitement and enthusiasm there. And then they would die of a broken heart because because when it didn't happen, they wouldn't make it. And so it's we're in this, we are totally in this together. We're going to work on this together. Just know you're running a marathon. Don't get hung up on a arbitrary deadline to it. It will get better. Don't hang up on when, just work your plan. Work your plan and you'll get through it.
Great advice, Dave. I appreciate you coming on today, and thanks everyone for taking an hour out of your day and watching this. Remember, MSP Initiative runs twice a week, and we'll continue to do so until we're hopefully out of the woods here, and just trying to bring people to the table that, help broaden your thought about what's actually happening and what to do and how to run your businesses moving forward. So we appreciate everybody from coming on. Dave, one more time, where do we find you online?
I'm easy to find. All the links to my stuff, it is at mspradio.com. Really encourage people to subscribe to the podcast 5 minutes a day, free on your podcatcher, and you're going to get insights and analysis every single day on what's going on and what you need to know.
Sports Center. I love it.
Exactly. That's what you need to know.
Stay safe, Dave. Talk soon.
Thanks a lot for having me.
All right. Have a good one.